Many of us like a clean room and a made bed, and I'll argue that's why so many of us like Tetris. But we're not here to only talk about Tetris. No, that came out 40 years ago. We'll be talking about Tetris Effect, a game named after the phenomenon where people start to see Tetris everywhere when they play it too much. Like Tricky Towers, a game I talked about in a previous video, Tetris Effect is a major tweak on the original Tetris game, although at its core it's fundamentally Tetris, dropping blocks to clear lines and increase your score. Part 1. Having an adventure. So it's like Tetris, but with better graphics? Yes and no. Let's first talk about what was added to create enjoyment of the game without changing the core design. Tetris Effect is about having an adventure, having an experience while you play Tetris. The main menu is beautiful. You're in space. I love it. A great place to have an adventure. It's not like there was a canon story to Tetris anyway. It's really impressive, all the environments they thought up. If there's any doubt that the aesthetics in this game are a main feature, there's a mode where you can just be in the environment without playing the game. While playing the game, you can adjust your zoom and rotation to maximize visual enjoyment. Honestly, it'd be a great thing to just throw up on a screen to create a relaxing vibe. And Tetris Effect also launched with VR support. Let's take a look at some of these environments. There's a strong embodied theme across them. What I mean is, while not all the environments are soothing, they all have a very human energy, almost like you're playing Beat Saber or Guitar Hero. Tetris Effect is not a rhythm game, but like in a rhythm game, they'll use very simple things like rotating and moving the pieces or clearing lines to add to the concert of visual and audio effects. Look how these jellyfish react to your playing the game in single player mode, in that mid-20th century downtown jazz feel. And these balloons. The transitions are so lovely. These dolphins moving around underwater, and then they're jumping out of the water. And this desert. It morphs into the moon, and there's the Earth off in the distance. And all throughout, there's music. It's so good. It's so good. Skillful use of reverb and panning the sound around. The music just seamlessly transitions to different parts of the song as you clear lines across several different areas. Part 2. Intrinsic motivation to play. Going back to what I said at the beginning, many of the people who really love this kind of game are the ones who look at a disorderly Tetris board and feel a little anxiety. Much like how many of us want to create beautiful houses in Minecraft, or upgrade that production in Factorio to be just a little more efficient and elegant. I might have guests over, and I want the place to look nice. That's what creates the intrinsic motivation to play Tetris. The very core of Tetris is clearing lines and seeing chaos turn into order, asymmetry to symmetry. But some of the multiplayer modes in Tetris Effect actually require you to make 2 or more lines at the same time to have a shot at winning. So the next layer on top of just clearing lines is clearing multiple lines simultaneously and getting a high score. Alright, listen up. Most games are not meant to be played with cheat codes, so you always win. They put you in a position of slight discomfort with a challenge that occupies your mind and gives you the feeling of victory and success when you get better and achieve something. And Tetris, and Tetris Effect, are very cool because your natural desire to have a clean house is inherently satisfying to fulfill. But that's not enough. With this added layer of making more than one line at the same time, you have to let your board get even more disarrayed, with more asymmetry, so you can build up to clearing 4 lines at once, otherwise known as a Tetris. And this is what makes the game's design so beautiful. and enjoyable. Cycles of building tension, where pieces lay on top of each other with gaps and crookedness, all to be resolved when that long 4-block eyepiece comes down the chute. Part 2A, Pacing. One way they build tension in Tetris Effect is through pacing. Each of these areas, environments, in single-player mode, requires clearing 36 or more lines depending on difficulty. Often, after you clear a third or 2/3 of the lines in a single area, there's a sound effect, and the falling speed of the blocks will increase and the music will intensify, like a boss stage. There was one particular area at the beginning that, when I played it in VR, strongly reminded me of the intense feelings of being on psychedelics. But then, it ended, and I felt relief. Each set of areas has its calm exposition, rising action into climax, and then resolution. And the resolution doesn't always come at the end. Sometimes the hardest part is the beginning of the third area of 4. And not every set of areas is necessarily harder than the last. It's like a multi-day hike. And if you screw up, you can just start from the last area you got to with a clean board. You don't have to start from the beginning of that set of areas. Although you can if you want. So the difficulty is somewhat self-enforced. Combined with the difficulty modes, it gives you a feeling of ease, if that's what you want, even as the overall difficulty slowly ramps up. Part 2B, Scoring. Another way they build tension is by adding disorder in multiplayer modes through attacks between players offline and online, AI and human. There are many different attack spells, and some are harder to deal with than others, requiring you to change up your strategy, like Fast, No Spin, where you can't rotate pieces, and Squeeze, which blocks off part of your board. Like the changing speeds in single-player mode, the attacks in multiplayer mode increases the stress of a messy board, but also increases the relief afterwards, when you are able to bring everything back into alignment, even when at first it seems like you are totally screwed. One way they do that is in the 3 versus 1 mode. After you clear enough lines, there's a period where you can clear lines together, and every few lines you clear together translates into chaos added to your opponent's board. You'll also notice that when your 3 boards combine together, the gaps you left in your board seem to melt away. So there's an interesting strategy where, when you notice that you're about to enter the combined board period, you can just throw out as many pieces as widely as possible, because you know they'll all compress down and make it easier to compress lines when you're all doing it together. A lot of the music in Tetris Effect features lyrics about loving others and yourself, so it seems fitting that they have this collaborative mode you play with friends. However, in this combined board period, you must place pieces taking turns. There's some great UI here to show the other players where you plan to put your pieces when you're waiting for them to drop a piece, but if your teammates have different skill levels, there can also be a sense of friction as you wait for them to slowly make a bad move. I've thought about it though, and I can't think of a way of reducing that friction without making it too easy or letting one player dominate the experience. So I think it's a good compromise. And that's it. I didn't touch on all modes of gameplay in Tetris Effect, but I think you probably have a good sense of the game's design. Ta-ta! Oh shit, I already said that. Oh god.